Welcome to Dreamscribe, your companion on the journey to peaceful sleep. Before you drift off, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps this calming community grow. Where in the world are you tuning in from? You ever notice something just a little off? Something small. Something that shouldn't matter, but it does? Maybe your keys weren't where you left them. Maybe your reflection blinked wrong. Or maybe your license plate started spelling things out for you. Warnings that only you can see. At first, you ignore it. But what happens when it won't stop changing? When it knows where you're going and who's waiting for you there? This is what happened to me. And if you're listening, it might happen to you too. A simple road trip, at first. I had been on the road for 3 days when I first noticed it. Just a tiny thing. Something I almost brushed off. I was parked outside a gas station somewhere off Highway 89, just outside Flagstaff. It was one of those quiet desert stations. One pump, an old rusted sign swinging in the breeze, and a cashier who looked like he had been born behind the counter. I was on a road trip. Just me and my RV, cutting through the Arizona desert. I had no strict plan, just a playlist, a map, and a few stops I wanted to hit. It was supposed to be a break from everything. Work stress, personal drama. I just needed open roads and silence. It was around midnight. The gas station was mostly empty. Just me and a trucker grabbing coffee. That's when I saw it. My license plate. It didn't look wrong exactly, but something about it bothered me. The plate had always been 3XH982, but right now, in the dim glow of the gas station lights, it looked different. It said 3XH983, just one number off. I frowned, shook my head. Maybe I was tired, but it bugged me. I had owned this RV for 3 years. I knew my plate. Maybe it was a trick of the light? A smudge? I took a picture of it on my phone. Looked normal in the photo. Shrugging it off, I went inside, paid for gas, and hit the road. The second change. The highway stretched out into dark nothingness. My headlights carved a narrow path through the desert, but beyond that, only shadows. After a few miles, my unease faded. I put on some music, let the hum of the road lull me into calm. But about an hour later, I stopped again, this time at a small rest area. Just a lonely parking lot, a couple of vending machines, and a flickering streetlight. I stepped out to stretch my legs, and that's when I noticed it again. My license plate had changed. It was no longer 3XH983. Now it read 3XH987. I stared at it. A slow chill crawled up my spine. I pulled up the picture from earlier. It still showed 3XH982. I took another picture. Compared them. Something was wrong. I turned, scanning the empty parking lot. The vending machines hummed. The desert wind whispered against the pavement. No one else was here. My breath came out shaky. Maybe I was just remembering it wrong. I climbed back into the RV, locked the doors, and tried to shake the feeling. Just drive. Just focus on the road. The first message. I drove another 40 miles before I saw the next gas station. Something about it felt safer than the lonely rest stop. Bright lights. A few parked cars. I pulled in. Got out. And I froze. The license plate had changed again. It wasn't just numbers anymore. It now read, turn. I stumbled back. My stomach twisted. The wind picked up, rattling the signs overhead. A truck rumbled past on the highway, its headlights sweeping over my RV. I snapped a picture. Checked my phone. The picture still showed the old plate. This was impossible. I looked around. Who was messing with me? I walked around the RV, checked the bumper. Ran my fingers over the metal plate. It was real. I was wide awake. The gas station cashier watched me through the window like I was crazy. I turned away, feeling my heart pound. Something wasn't right. I got back in the RV, locked the doors. I sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel. Then slowly I put the RV in drive and pulled back onto the highway. The fear sets in. For the next 20 minutes, I kept checking my mirrors. Watching the plate. It didn't change. I told myself it was some weird joke. Maybe a heat mirage. Maybe exhaustion. I needed sleep. That's all. But then I saw something up ahead. A turnoff. It was an old dirt road. A tiny wooden sign said Scenic Overlook 2 miles. And something in my gut twisted. The plate had said turn. Was this what it meant? I swallowed hard. Kept driving. Didn't turn. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The last change of the night. I pulled into a motel parking lot just outside a small town. I was done driving for the night. I climbed out, exhaustion weighing me down. The cool night air made my skin prickle. And then I saw it. The plate. The new message. Why? I felt my breath catch in my throat. The motel's neon sign buzzed faintly. A lone car sat in the lot, engine still warm. I looked around, my pulse hammering. No one was near my RV. No one had touched it. And yet, the message had changed. I took a shaky breath, grabbed my phone, snapped another picture, and then, without another glance, I turned and went inside the motel. I didn't check out the plate again, didn't look at the RV at all. I just locked the motel door behind me, shut the blinds, and lay awake in bed for hours. Something was happening, and deep down I knew this was only the beginning. Closing hook for viewers. At first, I thought I could ignore it. I thought maybe I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But the messages kept coming, and they got worse. And then one night, the plate didn't just change. It told me something I wish I'd never seen. But I'll get to that. For now, just check your license plate before you go to sleep. And if it ever spells something new, don't ignore it. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just exhaustion, a trick of the light. But when your own RV starts sending you warnings, when the messages get more personal, more urgent, that's when you stop making excuses and start running. I should have listened. I should have turned back when I had the chance. But I didn't. And now, I can't ever forget what happened next. Morning doubts and a false sense of normalcy. I barely slept that night. I lay awake in my motel room, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I wasn't losing it. Maybe someone had messed with my plate. Maybe I was too tired to think straight. By the time the sun rose, I was still shaken, but I forced myself to move on. I packed up, grabbed a stale muffin from the motel lobby, and walked outside. The first thing I did was check the plate. It was back to normal. 3XH 982. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. See, I muttered to myself, you're just tired. Still, my hands were shaky as I started the engine. I pulled onto the highway and told myself to forget about it. A new warning, and it knows my route. I drove for hours without issue. Miles of desert rolled past, the sky stretching wide and empty above me. For the first time in days, I felt normal. But by noon, I needed a break. I pulled into a tiny roadside diner, one of those places that probably hadn't changed since the 50s. As I parked, I felt it, a weird pull, like I was suddenly aware of my own heartbeat. I stepped out, looked at the plate, and my stomach dropped. It had changed again. Don't stop. I felt my legs go weak. The desert wind whistled across the pavement. I whipped my head around. The diner had a few customers inside, a couple of cars in the lot. No one near my RV. I snapped a picture, pulled up the last photo from this morning. It still showed 3XH 982. I swallowed hard. This wasn't random. It knew I was stopping here. The plate was reacting to my choices. I forced myself to breathe. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe. Bang. A loud crash echoed from inside the diner. I jumped. My heart raced. Through the window, I saw a waitress sprawled on the floor, a tray of dishes shattered around her. She was clutching her wrist, her face twisted in pain. A few people rushed to help her. Someone yelled for an ambulance. I felt sick. I looked at my plate again. Don't stop. I backed away, climbed into the RV, and peeled out of the parking lot. The rules become clear. I drove in silence. My mind was racing. This wasn't random. It wasn't my imagination. The plate had told me not to stop. And the moment I did, something bad happened. But what scared me most? What if that was just a warning? What if next time it was meant for me? A new message, a new threat. I drove for 3 more hours. Didn't stop. Didn't even look at the plate. But eventually I had to pull over. I needed gas. I pulled into a small station on the edge of a town. The place felt wrong. There were no other cars. The store looked abandoned. The lights were on, but the inside was empty. I hesitated, gripping the wheel. Checked the plate. My heart stopped. Get back in. I turned so fast I nearly tripped. The gas station door was cracked open. For the first time I noticed the register was open. A few items were knocked off the shelves, like someone had left in a hurry. I didn't think. I jumped back into the RV, locked the doors, and sped off. It's not just a warning anymore. I drove as fast as I could. Didn't check my mirrors. Didn't stop. After about 20 miles, I finally pulled onto a side road and let myself breathe. The plate had warned me. Something had been wrong at that gas station. Maybe I had just avoided something terrible. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands trembling, trying to make sense of it. And then, I felt a prickle on my skin, like I was being watched. Slowly, I turned. The rearview mirror was fogged up, like someone had breathed on it. I reached out with shaking fingers, wiped the glass, and in the reflection, for just a second, I saw a face, pale, sunken eyes, staring at me from the back of the RV. I whipped around. Nothing was there. The RV was empty, but my heart pounded so hard it hurt. I turned back to the mirror, and slowly, the words appeared, like someone was writing them in the fog. "You're not alone. The chase begins." I slammed on the gas. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get the hell away. The RV rattled as I sped down the highway, my knuckles white on the wheel. I checked the plate again. A new message. "Don't let it in." Tears burned my eyes. Something was in the RV. Or worse, something wanted in. The next destination, and the last warning. I knew I couldn't keep driving forever. I needed to figure this out. I pulled out my phone and searched for the nearest safe place. A campground, about 20 miles away. Somewhere with people. Somewhere that didn't feel so alone. I checked the plate one last time. And this time, it gave me a name. Not a warning. Not an order. Just a name. Jonah. I didn't know who Jonah was. Didn't know what it meant. But somehow, I knew I was going to find out. And I knew I wouldn't like the answer. I thought the license plate was just warning me, telling me where not to go, what to avoid. But it was worse than that. It wasn't just showing me danger, it was controlling it. And when it started counting down, I knew I was running out of time. I should have ditched the RV. I should have walked away. But it was already too late. The name that shouldn't be there. I couldn't stop staring at it. Jonah. The name sat on my plate, clear as day. It wasn't just a jumble of letters like before. It was a name. Someone's name. I had no idea who Jonah was. But somehow my RV did. And that thought chilled me more than anything. I snapped a picture, hands shaking. Then I forced myself to start driving again. The road stretched on, empty and quiet. The kind of silence that presses in on you. Like something was waiting. The gas station stranger. I saw the gas station before I saw the person. A lone station in the middle of nowhere. The lights were on, but the lot was empty. I slowed down, debating if I should pull in. Then I saw him. A man standing by the road, thumb out. His clothes were dirty, his hair wild. But it wasn't his appearance that made my stomach drop. It was his name tag. A ratty, faded name patch stitched onto his torn shirt. Jonah. I slammed the brakes. My heart pounded. The plate. The message. It knew. Jonah took a step toward me, shielding his eyes from my headlights. For a second, I considered flooring it, leaving him there. But my hands wouldn't move. Instead, I rolled down the window. Jonah's warning. "You all right?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Jonah nodded, his eyes darting behind me, like he was checking for something. "Yeah, just need a ride." His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't spoken in days. Something about him felt off, like he wasn't just a hitchhiker, like he had been waiting for me. I hesitated. Then, against every instinct, I unlocked the door. The countdown begins. Jonah climbed in. The second the door shut, my plate changed. 10 o'clock. A countdown. I felt my stomach drop. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to keep calm. Jonah's hands twitched. "Jonah." I forced a nod. "You from around here?" No, his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, like he was watching something I couldn't see. The timer ticked down. 9:30. I tightened my grip on the wheel. The air inside the RV felt wrong. Heavy. Thick. Like something was pressing in on us. I swallowed hard. "Where you headed?" Jonah didn't answer. He just whispered, "You shouldn't have stopped." "What's chasing us?" The road ahead was dark. Nothing but my headlights cutting through the black. I kept glancing at Jonah. He was breathing fast, fingers digging into his jeans, like he was trying not to panic, like he was waiting for something. I checked the plate. 8 o'clock. I forced my voice to stay calm. "Jonah, what's going on?" He turned to me, his face pale. "You don't see it yet?" A chill ran down my spine. "See what?" Jonah's breathing turned shaky. "You picked me up. That means it'll follow you now." My hands went cold. "What will?" Jonah just stared out the passenger window. Then he muttered, "Don't look in the mirrors." Something in the reflection. I kept driving. Jonah sat tense beside me, shoulders stiff. Every few minutes, he flinched, like he could hear something I couldn't. The air inside the RV got colder. The dashboard clock flickered. Then, a soft tap. I jumped. Jonah's face turned white. The tap came again. Light. Slow. From the bathroom door. My foot slammed the gas. We were alone. The RV was locked. No one was in here with us. Jonah refused to look. "Don't open it," he whispered. The tap came again. A slow, deliberate knock. I gripped the wheel. Refused to look at the mirrors. But my hands were shaking. And then, Jonah whispered, "It wants to see if you'll obey. The rules of the entity." I didn't respond. Didn't even breathe. Jonah turned to me, voice low. "If you look at it, it'll know." My mouth was dry. "It'll know what?" He swallowed hard. "That you're paying attention." The knock came again. Harder. Like whatever was in the bathroom was getting impatient. The plate changed. For a clock. I wanted to cry. "It's getting closer." I kept driving. Faster than I should. Jonah stayed silent. Every few minutes, I'd hear it. The slow knock. The sound of something breathing. Then, a voice. Soft. Whispering. Right behind my seat. "Who's driving?" I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Jonah squeezed his eyes shut. "Keep going. Don't talk to it." The plate changed again. 2:00. I was almost out of time. The final message. The RV felt smaller. The air thick and pressing. Something was right behind me. I could feel it, breathing against my neck. Jonah sat frozen. Then, the bathroom door creaked open. Jonah screamed. I couldn't help it. I looked, just for a second, and I saw it. A face. Not a person's. Something stretched. Hollow. Mouth too wide, eyes too black. Grinning. The plate changed one last time. Stop. A choice that can't be undone. I had no idea what it meant. But I listened. I slammed the brakes. The RV skidded, tires screaming against the pavement. And then, the door burst open. Jonah jumped out. I didn't stop him. Didn't even have time to think. Because as soon as he was gone, the plate reset. 3XH 982. Like none of it ever happened. I turned. The bathroom door was shut. The air was silent. Jonah was gone. And I had no idea if I'd just saved myself or made the biggest mistake of my life. The warning stopped. The countdown disappeared. But somehow that made it worse. Because now I don't know when it's coming back. But I know one thing for sure, whatever I let out that night, it's still out there. I thought it was over, that I was safe. But the plate never warned me about what happens after the countdown hits 0. It didn't just count down to something, it counted down to me. The empty road and the wrong silence. I sat there, gripping the wheel, my breath shallow. Jonah was gone. The bathroom door was closed. The license plate had reset to a normal jumble of letters. Like none of it had ever happened. But I knew better. I felt it. The wrongness, the weight of something still in the RV with me. It wasn't gone. It was waiting. I checked the mirrors. Nothing but the stretch of road behind me, dark and endless. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. From somewhere I couldn't see. Or worse, from somewhere inside. Jonah's final warning. I should have kept driving. Should have put as much distance as I could between me and whatever I had let out. But something wasn't right. Jonah ran like he knew what was coming. And before he left, his face, the look in his eyes, it wasn't relief. It was fear. Not for himself. For me. I swallowed, forcing myself to take my phone out. I still had the photo. The last plate message before the countdown. Stop. It hadn't been warning me. It had been commanding me. Why? The wrong reflection. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't want to check. Didn't want to look. But something inside me whispered. The mirrors. I turned my head, slow, stomach churning. And I saw it. Not my reflection. Not my RV. Something else. The mirror showed the inside of my RV. But I wasn't in it. I was looking at an empty driver's seat. My hands trembled. I raised my hand, waved. But the reflection didn't move. I wasn't seeing a reflection. I was seeing something else. Something that shouldn't exist. Something that meant I was already gone. I felt a breath on my neck. Close. Too close. And then the plate changed. The message that broke me. I didn't want to look. But I had to. I forced my eyes down to the rearview camera. A new message burned across the plate. You're not driving. My blood turned ice cold. I grabbed the wheel, fingers digging into the leather. But my hands, they weren't moving it. The wheel twitched, turned slightly to the left. Not by me, by something else. I let out a choked gasp. I wasn't alone. Something else had control. The shadow in the back. A sound came from the bathroom door. Not a knock, not breathing, a whisper, soft, gentle, like someone humming a lullaby. I turned slowly. The door was still closed, but the light beneath it flickered, like something was moving inside, something that had been waiting. I forced my shaking hand toward the lock. I needed to see, to end this. I gripped the handle, and the door swung open on its own. The passenger I never invited. The light flickered, casting the room in shadows. But something was in there, crouched in the dark, its shape wrong. Bent limbs, too many fingers, and a smile that stretched too wide. My breath hitched. I couldn't move. The thing unfolded itself, pulled itself up to full height. And then, it spoke, in Jonah's voice. You shouldn't have stopped. The escape that wasn't one. I lunged for the door handle, shoved the RV into park. But the engine didn't stop. The RV rumbled like it was alive, like it wasn't mine anymore. The thing in the bathroom took a step forward. Jonah's face flickered over it. Then my own, like it was trying them on, trying to decide. My body screamed at me to run, but the RV moved on its own. The wheel turned. The speedometer ticked up. The RV was driving itself, and I was trapped inside, the final destination. The headlights cut through the darkness, but I recognized the road ahead, the same lonely stretch where I had picked up Jonah. The RV was taking me back. I turned to the thing in the bathroom. It just smiled. You shouldn't have stopped, it repeated. But now I understood. The plate, the countdown. Jonah, it was never warning me about a thing. It was warning me about a place, and I was heading straight for it. The road that doesn't end. I grabbed the door handle, tried to force it open, but it wouldn't budge. The RV roared forward, speed increasing. I looked out the windshield, and my breath caught. The road ahead didn't have an end. The horizon twisted. The world looped. I wasn't going back. I was going somewhere else entirely, somewhere I was never meant to leave. And then, the plate changed. Welcome home. I screamed. I don't know where I am, how long I've been driving. The road never stops. The gas never runs out. I don't get tired, but I know one thing. I should have never picked up Jonah, because now someone else will stop for me. I thought the worst was over. I thought maybe somehow I could escape, but the license plate had one last message for me. And this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a promise. The road that never ends. The headlights cut through the endless dark. I didn't know how long I had been driving. Hours? Days? Weeks? The gas never ran out. I never got tired. My body should have ached from sitting this long, but I felt nothing. Like I wasn't really here anymore. Like I had become part of the RV itself. I stared at the dashboard. The radio was on, but no sound came out. The speedometer hovered at exactly 66.6 miles per hour. The mirrors still didn't reflect me, but I saw things in them. Shadows, faces, figures standing by the road. And behind me, something was breathing. The passenger that wasn't Jonah. I hadn't checked the bathroom door since it opened on its own. Hadn't dared to look inside. I knew what was in there. Or worse, I knew that I didn't. But I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Somewhere between the endless stretches of road, the thing in the bathroom moved. I heard it step out. I heard it sit down. I didn't look. Couldn't. But I saw its shadow in the passenger seat beside me. The shape was wrong. It was human-shaped, but not human. Its head tilted too far to one side, bones creaking. Fingers too long, too thin drummed against the dashboard. And then, it spoke, in Jonah's voice. Your turn. The final message. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I forced my eyes to the rearview camera. The license plate had changed again. One final message, glowing in the dark. Next exit, you. I swallowed hard. Shook my head. I didn't understand. What do you mean? I whispered. The thing beside me just laughed. It was a low, rattling sound, like something breaking inside its throat. It turned its head toward me, and though I still refused to look, I felt it grinning. You're almost home. The wrong highway. The road ahead wasn't the same anymore. The asphalt shifted, cracked, rippled like water. The stars overhead were too bright, too close. The trees on either side moved when I wasn't looking at them. I wasn't on a highway anymore. I was on something else. Somewhere I didn't belong. But the RV kept driving. Like it knew the way. Like it had always been heading here. And then in the distance, I saw it. A single figure standing in the middle of the road. Waiting. For me. The new Jonah. I hit the brakes. The RV didn't stop, didn't even slow down. The thing in the passenger seat chuckled. Too late. My breath came in short gasps as the headlights illuminated the person standing ahead. The figure lifted a hand, signaling for me to stop, and that's when I saw his face. And my stomach dropped, because the person standing in the road, flagging me down, wasn't a stranger. It was me, the horror of understanding. I stared at myself. The same jacket, the same tired, terrified expression. I watched as my own lips moved, as my own voice echoed in my ears. Please, you have to stop. I need a ride. I gripped the wheel, shook my head. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But the RV wasn't listening to me. It was still driving straight toward him. Straight toward me. The thing in the passenger seat chuckled. Better make room. And then, the plate changed. The final command. I looked at the screen, heart hammering, my hands slick with sweat, and the new message seared itself into my brain. Pull over. A sharp pain stabbed through my skull, like something was crawling into my thoughts. Like I wasn't the one making decisions anymore. The wheel turned. My foot pressed the brake. The RV slowed. My reflection stepped forward, smiled, reached for the door handle. And I knew exactly what was happening. The cycle continues. I had never been the driver. Not really. Not from the moment I picked up Jonah. Not from the moment I saw the first warning. I was always the next one. The next to wait in the road. The next to flag someone else down. The next to warn them. But no one ever listens. I hadn't. And now neither would he. The lock clicked. The door swung open. And my reflection climbed inside. Took my seat. Gripped the wheel. And turned to me grinning. Your stop. The new passenger. The RV lurched forward. Faster. The thing in the passenger seat, the thing that was me now, didn't look back. Didn't hesitate. Didn't care. The road stretched ahead, endless and unknown. I stood there, in the middle of the highway. Alone. Barefoot. Dizzy. Disoriented. I watched as the taillights disappeared into the distance. Watched as the new plate flickered into view. Countdown 10. I felt a deep, paralyzing dread. Because I knew exactly what would happen next. I remembered now. I had always been here, standing in the road, waiting for the next one to come along. And then in the distance, headlights, a car, driving toward me, slowing. The driver leaned out. Hey, you okay? Need a ride? I opened my mouth, and I smiled. Yes, please. You have to stop. Next story. I never paid much attention to highway graffiti. Just random tags, meaningless words, things people scrawled in the dead of night. But when it started mentioning my name, I should have turned back. The long road stretched ahead of me, an endless strip of cracked asphalt cutting through miles of empty land. It was one of those highways that felt like it led nowhere. No big cities. No major exits. Just gas stations, abandoned motels, and rest stops that looked like they hadn't been cleaned since the 80s. The sun was starting to set behind me, painting the sky in dull streaks of orange and purple. I should have stopped earlier, should have found a proper place to pull over for the night. But I had a bad habit of pushing my luck when driving, telling myself just a few more miles like the road ahead would somehow change. It didn't. The RV hummed steadily beneath me, its engine a familiar comfort. I'd been on the road for weeks now, taking the long way across the country. Not for fun, not for an adventure, just to get away. Away from the life I had left behind, away from the things I didn't want to deal with. The loneliness didn't bother me much. In fact, I preferred it. At least, I did until I noticed the graffiti. The first time, it barely registered. Just a spray-painted phrase on the side of an old overpass. Turn back. I didn't think much of it. Graffiti like that was everywhere. Warnings, political slogans, crude drawings. It was just part of the landscape of forgotten highways. Still, something about it stuck with me. Maybe it was the color, bright red, as if the paint was still drying. Or maybe it was the size of the letters, stretched wide across the concrete, like whoever wrote it really wanted it to be seen. I let it go. For the next few miles, I didn't see much of anything. Just more empty road, the occasional semi-truck rumbling past, and a few scattered gas stations on the horizon. I kept driving, kept watching the world roll by in my rearview mirror, kept telling myself I'd stop at the next decent-looking place. Then I saw the second message. We see you. This time I actually slowed down. It was painted on the back of a road sign, the kind that tells you how many miles to the next town. The words were small, but clear, written in the same deep red paint as before. "We see you." I glanced in my mirrors. The highway was empty. No cars behind me. No signs of life anywhere. A weird feeling crawled over my skin, but I shook it off. Kids messing around, I told myself. Some local weirdo trying to freak people out. I had no reason to be paranoid. No reason to let something that stupid get under my skin. But the further I drove, the worse it got. The first unsettling event. It wasn't just a couple of messages. Every few miles, more graffiti appeared. Some of it was normal, random scribbles, nonsense words, band names, phone numbers. But then there were the others. The ones that seemed specific. Too specific. "Why did you leave?" That one was scrawled across a concrete divider. I read it in a glance, my stomach twisting just slightly. It felt personal, even though I knew it couldn't be. Another one came half a mile later, sprawled on the side of a boarded-up gas station. "Is it worth it?" I swallowed hard, forcing a breath through my nose. My fingers gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. No, this was just my mind playing tricks on me. I'd been driving too long, spending too much time alone. I was starting to see meaning where there was none. That's all it was. Still, I turned on the radio, hoping for a distraction. Static. I tried another station. Then another. Nothing but static. Great. I sighed and reached for my phone, thinking I'd put on a podcast or something to fill the silence. And that's when I saw the next message. This one was worse, because this one had my name. A message meant for me. It was on the side of an overpass, written in huge drip of letters. "Keep going, MC's name." My foot slammed on the brakes. The RV skidded slightly before coming to a rough stop on the side of the road. I barely noticed. My heart was hammering in my chest, my breath caught somewhere in my throat. I stared up at the overpass, half expecting the letters to be something else, to rearrange themselves into a different word to make sense. They didn't. Someone had written my name. Not a common name. Not something generic. Mine. I swallowed, my throat dry. My mind scrambled for answers. Maybe I had stopped somewhere earlier, some diner or gas station, and someone saw my name on a receipt. But that didn't explain how it was already written here, waiting for me. I forced myself to breathe. Forced my hands to unclench from the wheel. I was being stupid. Overreacting. I wasn't going to let a damn piece of graffiti scare me. But I also wasn't going to sit here and stare at it any longer. I pressed my foot to the gas and kept driving. Doubt creeps in. For the next few miles, I told myself I was fine. That it was a coincidence. That maybe somehow I'd misread it. But the messages kept coming. "Don't stop now. You're almost there. Turn around before it's too late." By the time I saw the fifth message, my hands were shaking. I didn't stop driving. Didn't slow down. But I could feel something pressing in on me, something cold and heavy in the air. This wasn't random. It wasn't a joke. And I had a sickening feeling that whoever was writing these messages wasn't finished yet. The final warning. The last piece of graffiti I saw before full-blown panic set in was on the side of a rusted-out billboard. The letters were huge. So big they stretched across the entire surface, glowing under the beam of my headlights. I almost didn't want to read it, but my eyes locked onto the words before I could stop them. "Look behind you." A deep, bone-chilling shiver crawled down my spine. I didn't want to. I did not want to. But some horrible, undeniable instinct forced me to glance at the rearview mirror. For just a second. For just a fraction of a second. And I swear to God, something moved in the back of the RV. A dark shape. A figure. Something that hadn't been there before. Something that shouldn't be there now. I slammed on the gas, my heart pounding in my throat, my entire body screaming, "Move, move, move." And as I sped down that endless, empty highway, one final message appeared, burned into my mind like an afterimage. It was scrawled across the pavement itself, stretching out in massive letters ahead of me. "It's too late." I told myself it was all in my head. A prank. A coincidence. But the messages didn't stop. And worse, they knew things about me they shouldn't have known. Trying to rationalize. I kept driving. Faster than before. The RV rumbled down the highway at a speed that wasn't exactly safe, but I didn't care. Every instinct I had screamed for me to go, to put as much distance as possible between me and that last message. "Look behind you." I hadn't imagined it. I knew what I saw. A shadow. A figure. Something sitting in the back of the RV that hadn't been there before. But the moment I had turned my head to check, nothing. The interior was exactly how I left it. Empty. Still my skin crawled, my pulse refusing to slow. I gripped the wheel tighter, forcing my thoughts into order. There has to be a logical explanation. Maybe someone had broken in at one of my stops. Some drifter, a hitchhiker hiding in the back. It was a terrifying thought, but it made more sense than the alternative. Ghosts weren't real. Curses weren't real. But people did things like that all the time. The idea was enough to make me pull over. Not fully, just a quick, sharp swerve onto the shoulder of the highway. I killed the engine, took a breath, and then, with every nerve in my body screaming at me not to, I left the driver's seat and stepped toward the back of the RV. A search that proves nothing. The small space was dimly lit, shadows stretching along the walls as I moved cautiously through it. I checked everywhere, under the table, inside the tiny closet, even behind the drawn shower curtain. Nothing. I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my face. The relief should have been immediate, but it wasn't. Because now, I had no answers at all. No drifter. No signs of a break-in. No reason for what I'd seen in the mirror. That meant I was losing it. Or something worse was happening. Nope. I shut that thought down fast. I wasn't going to let my brain start spinning off into paranoia. I just needed sleep. Proper sleep. I told myself I'd stop at the next town, find a real place to park, and get a full night's rest. No more highway. No more driving in the dark. I had a plan. I had control. But then I saw the next message. The graffiti gets personal. This time, it wasn't on a road sign, or an overpass, or a billboard. It was on the side of my RV. Big, bold red letters smeared across the metal, like they had been written while I was still driving. You checked. Good. My breath caught in my throat. I took a slow step back, my body trembling in a way I couldn't stop. This wasn't normal. This wasn't possible. I had stopped for less than 2 minutes. I had searched the whole vehicle. I had been right here. And yet, someone had managed to write on the side of my RV without making a sound, without leaving a single trace of themselves behind. I didn't want to believe it, but how could I deny what was right in front of me? For the first time since this nightmare started, I considered turning back. I wasn't scared of a prank. I wasn't even scared of someone following me. I was scared because something was communicating with me, something unseen. And I had the sickening feeling that if I kept playing along, I wouldn't like what happened next. A desperate attempt to escape. I jumped back into the driver's seat, slammed the door shut, and turned the key so fast my fingers almost slipped. The engine roared to life. I didn't think, didn't hesitate. I just drove. The speed limit didn't matter anymore. I was pushing 80, then 85, the RV rattling beneath me, but I refused to slow down. I wasn't stopping. Not for another message. Not for anything. My hands clenched the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The road stretched ahead of me, dark and empty, headlights bouncing off faded lane dividers. I kept telling myself I'd reach a real town soon. Somewhere with people. Somewhere that felt safe. But that place never came. Just more highway. More empty road. More of the same. And then, I passed another stretch of graffiti. Except this time, it wasn't on a sign. It wasn't even on the road. It was on the trees. Hundreds of messages, all written in deep, dark red, twisting up trunks and stretching across branches. I barely had time to process them, but one stood out. One that sent an ice-cold dagger straight through my chest. Why do you think you can run? I hit the gas harder. The radio breaks the silence. I didn't know how long I drove like that. Could have been minutes. Could have been an hour. All I knew was that eventually I felt watched. I didn't see anything. Didn't hear anything. But something was there. The pressure in the air changed. The space around me felt tighter, heavier. And then the radio, the one that had been playing nothing but static since this started, turned on by itself. At first, it was faint. A whisper beneath the static. Then it grew clearer. A voice. Not deep. Not distorted. Just normal. You should have turned back. The breath fled from my lungs. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't a recording. It was real. And it came from inside the RV. Right behind me. The turning point. I accept the unnatural. I couldn't take it anymore. I jerked the wheel to the side, skidding onto the shoulder, tires kicking up dust and gravel. The moment I stopped, I spun around in my seat. The back of the RV was dark, silent, empty, except it didn't feel empty. I swallowed hard, my body rigid. Then, slowly, I turned back toward the windshield and screamed, because right there, on the glass, written in the same red paint as before, "It's in here with you." I should have turned back. I should have never looked at the messages, but it was too late. It knew me now, and it wasn't going to let me leave. The words won't come off. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the windshield. My breath came in short, ragged bursts. My pulse hammered inside my skull. The red writing glistened in the reflection of my headlights, dripping downward, but not like paint. Not like something natural. It looked too thick, too dark. I swallowed, forcing my body to move. I grabbed the sleeve of my jacket and wiped at the glass. The words didn't smudge, didn't streak, didn't move at all. I pressed harder, panic rising in my throat, and still, nothing. The message was part of the glass, like it had been etched into it. And then, out of nowhere, something knocked on the passenger side window. Not a polite knock, not a hesitant one, a single hard bang. I turned my head so fast my neck popped. Nothing was there, but that was somehow worse, because deep down I knew. Something had been. I could still feel it watching me. The graffiti predicts my next move. I needed to get out of there. I slammed the RV into drive, foot shaking against the gas pedal. The tires screeched against the asphalt, the engine growling as I tore back onto the highway. I didn't care where I was going. I didn't care how fast I was going. I just wanted to get away. But I never did, because the messages followed me. Every single one. Each new stretch of road, each sign, each abandoned building. I saw my name, my thoughts, my fears staring back at me. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to read them. But I couldn't help myself. I caught glimpses between the trees. I saw them spray painted onto old wreckage on the side of the road. I saw them in my own rearview mirror, flashing on the back of signs I had already passed. And then I saw the worst one. Not a warning. Not a taunt. Not even a command. But a prediction. Scrawled across a massive concrete wall. You'll stop at the gas station. I clenched my jaw. No, I won't. I was going to keep driving. I was going to push through. I wasn't going to give in. And then, the gas light on my dashboard flicked on. The inevitable detour. I stared at the glowing orange icon, my stomach sinking. I had filled up before this trip. I should have had plenty of gas left. But somehow, I was already on empty. My hands tightened around the wheel. I pressed the pedal harder, watching the numbers on the dashboard flicker. Miles to empty, 15. Miles to empty, 12. Miles to empty, 9. I cursed under my breath. I was going to have to stop. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. But if I didn't, I'd be stranded on this godforsaken highway. And something told me that was exactly what it wanted. The gas station that shouldn't exist. I didn't see the gas station until it was almost too late. One moment, the road was empty. The next, a small, flickering neon sign cut through the darkness like a knife. Gas. Open 24 hours. It looked ancient. The building was squat, old, the edges blurred with time and neglect. But what sent a deep, primal fear slamming into my gut was that it wasn't on my GPS. No name, no listing, no record of it ever existing. It was just there, waiting for me, just like the graffiti said it would be. Something is wrong with the attendant. I pulled up next to the nearest pump, the RV shuddering as it finally came to a stop. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the small station. The glass windows were dirty, streaked with grime. The door was cracked open slightly, swaying with the wind. And inside, someone was standing behind the counter. Still. Too still. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move. With shaking hands, I reached for my wallet and stepped out of the RV. The night air hit me like a slap. Everything was too quiet. No wind. No insects. No sounds from the road. Just silence. I forced my legs forward. One step. Then another. And then I was inside. The attendant didn't move. Didn't acknowledge me. Didn't even blink. Just stood there, staring at the counter. His face. Something was wrong with his face. The skin looked painted on, like it wasn't real. And when he finally spoke, his voice was off. Flat. Unnatural. You finally made it. It knows me. I stumbled back. The words hit me like a hammer to the chest. What? I said, are you paying with cash or card? The voice had changed. Less unnatural. More normal. Like he hadn't said that first sentence at all. But I knew I hadn't imagined it. I knew. I shoved my card onto the counter, my fingers cold, my breath unsteady. The attendant, if that's what he even was, took it without looking at me. He swiped it, handed it back. Then, in the same flat, unnatural tone, you should check the back of your RV. A chill ran down my spine. What? He didn't answer. Just stared. Face blank. expressionless. I backed away, back toward the door, back toward my only escape. And then, as I stepped outside, I saw the newest message, written in massive, dripping letters across the side of the RV. Don't turn around. I should have never stopped. I should have never looked. But the graffiti wasn't just predicting my future anymore. It was controlling it, the warning I can't ignore. I stood frozen outside the gas station, my breath catching in my throat. The newest message loomed over me, scrawled in massive, dripping letters across the side of my RV. Don't turn around. I didn't want to. I wanted to sprint into the driver's seat and slam my foot on the gas pedal. But the human brain is a cruel, traitorous thing. Because the second you tell someone not to do something, that's all they can think about. My skin burned. My heartbeat pounded against my ribs like a drum. I wasn't even sure I had the choice to ignore it anymore. Because deep down, I already knew. Something was standing behind me, disobeying the graffiti. I turned my head just slightly, trying to listen. But there was no sound. Nothing. Not even the wind. The entire world felt like it was holding its breath. I swallowed hard, my muscles stiff and rigid, my palms slick with sweat. I took a slow, careful step forward, and then I heard it. A faint, wet scraping sound against the pavement, like something shuffling forward. It wasn't close, but it was getting closer. A sharp, electric pulse of terror shot down my spine. I was out of time. I either had to follow the warning, or I had to face it. I turned around, and instantly I knew. I had made a terrible mistake. The thing standing on the road. At first, I couldn't process what I was looking at. It stood near the edge of the gas station's flickering lights, its body stretched unnaturally tall, its limbs too thin, too long. But the worst part was the face, because it wasn't a face at all. It was a wall of graffiti, a mess of smeared black and red spray paint, shifting constantly, letters forming and twisting, mimicking my thoughts. I saw my name appear across its forehead. I saw "Don't Look" stretch across its jaw. I saw "You should have listened" scrawl across where its eyes should have been. And then, it took a step forward, and the words changed. Run. The desperate escape. I didn't hesitate. I bolted toward the RV, legs shaking, breath coming in short, frantic gasps. I fumbled for the handle, shoved the door open, and threw myself inside. The second the door slammed shut, I turned the key. The engine roared to life. I slammed the pedal to the floor, tires screeching as I peeled out of the lot. I didn't dare look back, didn't dare check the mirrors. But in the corner of my vision, I could still see the words. They were appearing along the road, mile after mile, getting bigger, more aggressive, more threatening. And then just ahead, I saw it. One final message, stretched across an entire overpass in dripping, black paint. It's in the RV. I'm not alone. I slammed on the brakes. The RV skidded, tires screeching, my heart hammering. I could feel it, the weight of something else in the vehicle. The air had changed, thicker, heavier. I reached for my phone with a shaking hand, flipped on the front-facing camera, and aimed it over my shoulder. For a second, the screen was normal, just the empty interior of the RV. And then, words began forming across the walls. Right behind me, I watched in real time as the spray-painted letters twisted and smeared, scrawling themselves across the furniture, the ceiling, the floor. And finally, across my own reflection. Look at me. I dropped the phone. Nowhere to run. My breathing was shallow, my thoughts spiraling. There was no escape. No matter how far I drove, no matter how many roads I took, it was inside now. It wasn't following me anymore. It was with me. The RV felt smaller somehow, the walls closing in. The words kept forming, each one worse than the last. You can't leave. I'm part of you now. Wherever you go, I go too. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. But I knew it wasn't going to let me leave. And even if I did, I would never be alone again. Final choice, accept or resist. I took a deep breath, staring at the road ahead. The graffiti wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a sentence, and it had already been carried out. I had two choices. Fight against it, try to leave the RV, try to pretend it wasn't happening, try to run. Or accept it. I let out a slow, unsteady breath. My hands relaxed on the wheel. The RV hummed softly around me. The words had stopped shifting. They weren't mocking me anymore. They were just there. Part of the vehicle. Part of me. I turned onto the next stretch of highway, driving into the darkness. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. The road was waiting, and so was the next message. The road that never ends. I don't know how long I've been driving. Days? Weeks? Time feels wrong now. Like the moment I accepted the graffiti, the world around me stopped functioning the way it used to. The gas gauge never empties. The road never changes. I don't stop for food. I don't feel hungry. I don't feel anything at all, except for one thing. I can feel it watching me, even when I close my eyes, even when I try to pretend this isn't real. The words have taken over the RV now. Every inch of the walls is covered, not just with warnings anymore, but conversations. At first, they were short, simple. Hello, you see me now. I like when you drive. I ignored them. But then, they changed. They started answering me, talking to the walls. I made the mistake of testing it. One night, as I was driving, I whispered, "What are you?" The words appeared instantly across the windshield. I am the road. The letters smudged and twisted, reforming. I am the words. I am you. My hands clenched the wheel. My throat felt dry, my heart pounding. Where are you taking me? The answer came slowly this time, each letter dripping like ink. You'll see soon. And then another line appeared, right on the dashboard. Almost there. The roadside graves. I don't remember pulling over, but I did. I must have, because now I was standing outside the RV. The air smelled wrong, like burnt rubber and old dust. The highway was completely empty, not a single car in either direction. And then I saw them, the markers on the roadside. Not signs, not billboards, gravestones. They stretched into the distance, disappearing into the darkness. I took a hesitant step forward, my breath catching in my throat as I saw the names. They weren't just any names. They were mine, over and over and over. Hundreds, thousands, different variations. Michael Reese, lost on this road, 1987. Mike Reese, never escaped, 1994. M. Reese, tried to run, 2003. Some of them were so recent the dirt was still freshly disturbed. And then, I saw the newest one. A plain, unmarked stone. No date, no name. But as I watched, words began to appear. Right in front of my eyes, the letters carved themselves into the stone. Michael Reese arrived. I was never the first. The RV door creaked behind me. I turned, and I saw it, the shape from before. Tall, stretched, too thin limbs. Its face a mess of graffiti. And this time I didn't run, because I understood. This thing, this force, it had been taking people for years. It finds travelers, people who wander too far, people who read the messages instead of ignoring them. People like me. It doesn't just follow them. It consumes them, takes them into its road. And then, it makes them part of the story, the final message. I felt something shift behind me. I turned back to the gravestone. And this time, the name had changed. It wasn't mine anymore. It was someone else's. A name I didn't recognize. A new traveler. A new victim. The next one to take my place. I felt the road calling to me. The letters formed across the pavement. Right at my feet. Keep driving. I swallowed hard. I took a step back toward the RV. Because I understood now. I wasn't a person anymore. I wasn't a traveler. I wasn't a victim. I was part of the highway now. And the road was always hungry. Next story. The night stretched endlessly ahead of me. An ink-black ribbon of highway cutting through miles of silent nothingness. My RV hummed softly as it rolled over the deserted road, the dashboard lights casting a dim glow on my tired hands gripping the wheel. It was one of those nights where the world felt abandoned. No other cars, no signs of life, just the occasional highway marker flashing past like a forgotten countdown to nowhere. I hadn't planned on driving this late, but I had miscalculated the distance between gas stations. My last stop had been a rundown station off Route 46, where the attendant barely spoke and the air smelled of old motor oil and dust. I had grabbed a coffee, hoping it would keep me sharp, but my body still begged for rest. The silence in the RV was beginning to get to me. I had been on the road for hours, and the only company I had was the low drone of my own thoughts. The monotony of the drive was hypnotic, and I knew I needed something, anything, to break it up before exhaustion pulled me under. I reached for the radio dial, twisting it absent-mindedly. Static. More static. The familiar hiss of empty frequencies crackled through the speakers, interrupted by the occasional fragment of a distant station that faded before I could catch a word. My fingers kept turning the dial. Then, like a voice emerging from deep water, a signal locked in. Out there on the open road, all alone, watching the world pass by in the rear view. It gets lonely, doesn't it? I froze. The voice was warm, smooth, with the practiced ease of a late-night radio host. The kind you'd expect to hear on some vintage AM station. The type that played classic rock and jazz while taking calls from sleepless souls. But it was something about what he had said that made my stomach tighten. I shook my head. Coincidence. That's all it was. These shows always opened with something vague and introspective, designed to hook a wandering listener. I leaned back, exhaling, willing myself to relax as the DJ continued. Welcome, travelers, to the night shift. I'll be your host for the evening. You can call me Jack. There was a pause, like he was waiting for me to respond. Now, let's see, what do we have here? Jack's voice lowered, almost conspiratorial. A lonely driver, pushing through the night, looking for a little company. Well, don't worry, friend. You're exactly where you need to be. A chill scraped up my spine. I swallowed, forcing a chuckle. Weird timing, I muttered to myself. I glanced at the radio display. No station number. Just a faint, flickering line, like the signal itself was unstable. I adjusted in my seat, keeping one hand on the wheel. Maybe this was one of those experimental indie radio projects, something meant to sound immersive and unsettling. Some late-night broadcast designed to creep people out for fun. If that was the case, it was working. Jack chuckled, a rich, knowing sound. Ah, I can hear it now. That little voice in the back of your head, trying to make sense of this. Rationalizing. Another pause. It's okay, really. We all do it. We all want the world to make sense. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. All right, I muttered. This is getting weird. I reached for the dial to change the station. Aha! Don't touch that dial, friend. My hand froze. The breath in my lungs turned solid. Slowly, as if moving through molasses, I pulled my hand back. My heart was pounding. Jack chuckled again, smooth and slow. Good. That's better. You wouldn't want to leave just yet, would you? We were just starting to get acquainted. I licked my lips, glancing at the empty road ahead. Okay. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Or maybe this was a prank. Yeah, that had to be it. Some new AI-generated broadcast, pulling metadata from cell towers, personalizing it to whoever was listening. Creepy, sure, but explainable. Right? Jack sighed, almost amused. You're trying so hard to explain me away. You're even thinking about AI. That's cute. I slammed on the brakes. The RV lurched to a stop in the middle of the road, my breath ragged. The coffee cup I had balanced in the cup holder sloshed over, dripping onto my jeans. For a moment, everything was completely still. The radio hummed. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and turned the volume knob all the way down. The glowing display flickered. Silence. I let out a shaky breath, running a hand over my face. What the hell was that? I sat there, gripping the wheel, pulse hammering in my ears. The road stretched out ahead of me, barren and dark, the trees lining the highway standing like silent sentinels. I needed to get moving. Needed to find the next gas station, a motel, somewhere with people. I shifted the RV into drive, hands still slick with sweat. And then, through the speakers, clear as a whisper against my ear, I told you not to turn me down. The radio was off. I jerked in my seat, my foot slipping off the gas pedal. The voice was inside the RV. A deep, slow chuckle filled the small space, rich with amusement. That's okay. We have all night. The lights on the dashboard flickered. The air felt thick, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. And then, softly, the sound of an old vinyl record crackled through the speakers. A song started playing. A song I hadn't heard since I was a kid. A song my mother used to sing to me. A song no one else should have known. I stared at the radio, my breath shallow, my fingers gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Jack's voice returned, smooth as ever, but now, there was something beneath it. Something hungry. Now, he murmured, let's talk about you. I kept driving. What else was I supposed to do? Stopping in the middle of a dark, empty highway wasn't an option. And turning off the radio hadn't worked. It was still playing, still speaking to me, even when the dial was turned down to 0. Even when the power button was off. The low crackle of the record still hummed through the speakers, the familiar melody twisting into something warped and unfamiliar. My mother used to sing that song to me when I was little. She'd hum it while driving me home from school, her fingers tapping on the steering wheel, completely unaware that those memories would one day feel like an intrusion rather than a comfort. I gritted my teeth and tightened my grip on the wheel. This was just a prank. That was the only explanation that made sense. Some kind of radio frequency hijack, Or maybe even some weird coincidence, like how social media ads seem to know what you're thinking before you say it out loud. That had to be it. Jack's voice broke through my thoughts, smooth and amused. "You're still fighting it," he mused. "That's good. I like a challenge." I exhaled through my nose, heart pounding. "Don't react." That's what people always said about pranks. If you acted scared, you gave them what they wanted. "Yeah," I muttered, trying to force some false bravado into my voice. "Real funny, man. You got me. Hell of a radio setup you got." Jack chuckled, like we were old friends sharing an inside joke. "Ah, there it is, the bravado. The rationalizing." He sighed, almost wistfully. "It always goes this way." I furrowed my brow, watching the road ahead. "What do you mean? It always goes this way?" A beat of silence. Then, softly, "I mean, we've done this before." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Yeah, okay. Sure. Now you're just messing with me." "Am I?" The song faded out, the last notes stretching into an eerie quiet. Then a click, like an old cassette being flipped. A new song started playing. But not just any song. My song. Not a track from an album. Not something I had ever shared online. Not something anyone would recognize. It was me. Me as a teenager. Strumming a half-tuned guitar. My voice shaky as I mumbled the lyrics I had written in my bedroom over a decade ago. I nearly swerved off the road. My pulse thundered in my ears as I stared at the radio in disbelief. How? I had never recorded that. Never played it in front of anyone. I had written that song when I was 16, late at night, half whispering into my pillow so my parents wouldn't hear me. Jack hummed along with the melody. "Still catchy," he commented. "Always liked this one." My breath hitched. "What the hell?" "Careful now," he interrupted. "You almost ran off the road back there. Would be a shame if our little conversation ended too soon." I clenched my jaw, knuckles white against the wheel. This isn't real. It can't be. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Had I recorded it on my phone at some point? Maybe an old file synced to the cloud without me realizing? But that wouldn't explain how the radio was playing it. Jack sighed. "You're thinking too hard again." The song faded, replaced by the soft, ambient crackle of dead air. For a moment, it was almost peaceful. Then, in a tone so casual it sent ice through my veins, Jack said, "So, where are you headed?" I didn't answer. Jack chuckled. "All right, let's play a game instead. I'll guess, and you tell me if I'm wrong." I swallowed. My hands were slick with sweat. "You're looking for something," he mused. "Or maybe running from something. Either way, you're not really sure what's at the end of this road, are you?" I stayed silent, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Jack clicked his tongue. "Ah, but it's not just aimless wandering. There's something specific keeping you up tonight. Something that made you hit the road instead of sleeping in a warm bed like most people. Something you don't want to think about." My fingers tightened around the wheel. I hadn't told anyone why I was on this trip. Not even myself. Jack sighed, almost disappointed. Still not ready to talk. "That's okay. I can wait." The radio crackled, shifting to a new station. My breath caught in my throat. A voice came through. Not Jack's. Mine. Not a recording. Not an old memory. It was me right now. "Still not ready to talk," the voice on the radio repeated. "That's okay. I can wait." I nearly slammed on the brakes again. "Aha," Jack chided. "You keep doing that, and someone's going to get hurt." I swallowed hard, my entire body trembling. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Darkness. No headlights. No cars. Nothing. I licked my lips, forcing my voice to stay steady. "What do you want?" Jack's voice softened. "Oh, I think you already know." A long pause. Then, barely above a whisper. "I just want to be heard." The radio clicked again. Another station. And this time, the voice that came through made my stomach drop. It was my mother. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft, warm, like she used to sound before the sickness took her. "You doing okay?" I almost pulled off the road right then and there. This wasn't a recording. It wasn't an old voicemail. It was her. Jack's voice returned, gentle and coaxing. "Go ahead. Talk to her." I gripped the wheel so tight I thought I might break it. "No," I whispered. Jack sighed, disappointed. "You always do this." The static grew louder. The RV's headlights flickered. And then a new voice came through. A voice I didn't recognize. But it knew my name. "Hey, buddy," the man on the radio drawled. "Haven't seen you in a long time." I didn't answer. The man chuckled. "Ah, you remember me, don't you?" I didn't. But something deep in my gut told me I should. Jack hummed in approval. "Now we're getting somewhere." The static surged, swallowing the voices whole. And then, silence. Dead air. I let out a shaky breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. The radio was quiet. The road was still. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was alone. Then a whisper. From the back of the RV. Keep driving. The whisper came from the back of the RV. Keep driving. I whipped my head around, heart pounding so hard it nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. But the back of the RV was empty. Just the small kitchenette, the sleeping area, and the darkened bathroom door swaying slightly from the motion of the road. Nothing else. I turned back to the windshield, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were bone white. My breathing came shallow and ragged, my pulse drumming in my ears. The radio had gone silent again. No static, no eerie music, no Jack. It should have been a relief. But somehow it felt worse. My skin prickled with that awful sensation of being watched. Not just from outside the RV, but from within it. Like something was sitting in the empty booth behind me just out of sight, waiting. I forced my hands to steady, my grip on the wheel tightening. This is just a trick, I muttered to myself. A radio hijack. A weird frequency thing. Silence. Then, a small sound crackled through the speakers. A breath. Not static. Not a recording. It was the unmistakable sound of someone breathing directly into a microphone. Slow. Even. Like they were waiting for me to speak first. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Who's there? I rasped. A beat of silence. Then, a voice that wasn't Jack's. You already know who I am. I slammed the brakes before I even realized what I was doing. The RV lurched forward, tires screeching against the pavement. My seatbelt locked tight against my chest, the entire vehicle shuddering to a halt in the middle of the highway. Dust and gravel settled in the headlights. Beyond them, nothing but empty road. The voice on the radio had sounded like me. No, it was me. The same tone, the same cadence. Like an echo. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. My breath came in uneven gasps, my fingers trembling as I reached for the dial. Slowly, I turned it down. The volume didn't change. I jabbed the power button. The screen flickered, then stayed on. You can't turn me off, the voice said. You never could. A chill raced down my spine. This wasn't just a prank. It wasn't some rogue transmission. It was speaking to me. I swallowed, my throat tightening. Who are you? For a moment, there was only that slow, steady breathing. Then, look behind you. My body locked up. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. I stared straight ahead, my hands frozen on the wheel. Don't do it. Don't turn around. The air inside the RV felt heavy, pressing in against my chest like something unseen had filled the space around me. I could feel it. Something was behind me, waiting, watching. Turn around, the voice urged. It's rude to ignore yourself. I squeezed my eyes shut, my pulse hammering so hard it made my vision blur. This isn't happening. This isn't real. Then, a faint click. The sound of a cassette being flipped. A new voice crackled through the speakers. My mother. Sweetheart, she murmured, the warmth in her voice so real it nearly shattered me. Why won't you talk to me? I sucked in a sharp breath. No, I whispered. Not her. Not like this. You always do this, she sighed. You always push me away when I'm trying to help. My hands trembled. I felt 6 years old again, standing in the doorway of her hospital room, too afraid to step inside. Too afraid to see her hooked up to those machines, to hear how weak her voice had become. Don't, I croaked. Don't do this. A pause. Then gently. Then stop running. A cold sweat prickled at the back of my neck. That's what this is about, isn't it? She continued. That's why you're out here, in the middle of nowhere, driving until your eyes burn. My throat tightened. I couldn't answer. Jack's voice returned, smooth and knowing. You never were good at facing things head-on, were you? I gritted my teeth. Shut up. Jack only chuckled. Oh, now you want me to shut up. But just a few miles back, you were dying to know who I was. I sucked in a sharp breath, my pulse roaring in my ears. Here's a hint, he said. The radio clicked again. A new sound filled the RV. Footsteps. Not through the speakers. Inside the vehicle. Soft. Careful. Coming from the back. Coming closer. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. The air felt wrong, like the oxygen had been sucked out of the space, leaving behind something dense and suffocating. The footsteps stopped directly behind my seat. A long, heavy silence. Then a whisper against my ear. Did you miss me? I snapped. I slammed my foot against the gas pedal. the RV jerking forward so violently that whatever was behind me lurched backward. I didn't look. I couldn't. The RV tore down the highway, the speedometer climbing higher and higher. The radio screeched with static, voices warping, twisting, laughing. You can't run forever. Where do you think this road ends? You already know who I am. I gritted my teeth, one hand gripping the wheel, the other yanking the radio free from the dashboard. Sparks flew. The screen died. For the first time in miles. Silence. The road stretched ahead, empty and endless. I kept driving. My breath came ragged, my hands trembling against the wheel. No voices. No whispers. No footsteps. Just me. Alone. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Had it worked? I glanced in the rearview mirror. Darkness. Nothing. I let out a shaky breath, gripping the wheel tighter. Maybe I was free of it. Maybe it had all been in my head. Then, a sound. Not from the radio. From the passenger seat. Breathing. Slow. Steady. I turned my head. The seat was empty, but the indentation was still there, like someone was sitting right beside me. Waiting. The RV speakers crackled to life. Jack's voice returned, soft and satisfied. There you are. The breath in the passenger seat was slow and steady. Measured. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. That weight in the air, that pressure pushing against my skull, crawling down my spine. It was there, sitting right beside me. Watching. Waiting. The RV's headlights stretched out across the empty highway, swallowing up the dark. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, my fingers locked in a death grip. I could barely breathe, let alone think. Jack's voice slid through the speakers, smooth and satisfied. There you are. I squeezed my eyes shut. This isn't real. This isn't happening. It's just a radio. Just a stupid voice on the airwaves. But then something shifted. The seat beside me creaked. Like weight was being added to it. I swallowed down the scream rising in my throat. My hands trembled against the wheel. I wanted to look. I didn't want to look. Jack chuckled. Come on, he murmured. You've been so curious this whole time. Haven't you? You drove all these miles just to hear my voice. My breath hitched. That's what this is about, isn't it? Jack continued. You don't drive because you want to. You drive because you're scared of stopping. My fingers flexed against the wheel. Shut up. His voice darkened. Or what? The temperature inside the RV plunged. The windshield fogged over instantly, my breath visible in the frigid air. My skin broke into goosebumps, the cold sinking deep into my bones. And then, the passenger seat shifted again. Like whoever, whatever, was there had leaned in closer. Jack's voice was right against my ear. Why don't you take a look? A shudder racked my body. I kept my eyes locked on the road, but the longer I stared, the more it changed. The highway wasn't empty anymore. The road signs had changed. I barely registered it at first, just a small, creeping wrongness. But then I saw them. Mile markers, one after the other. Each one covered in thick, black spray paint. Not numbers. Not destinations. Just a name. My name. Every single sign. Each one getting closer. My vision tunneled. No, I whispered. Jack let out a pleased hum. I told you, didn't I? You never should have tuned in. I slammed on the brakes. The RV screeched to a violent stop. The tires skidded across the asphalt, smoke curling into the air. My seatbelt locked tight across my chest as the force of the stop nearly threw me forward. And then silence. My pulse roared in my ears, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The radio was dead. No static. No voice. The air inside the RV was thick, suffocating. My hands shook as I reached for the keys, ready to kill the engine. That's when I saw it. A new road sign. Right at the edge of my headlights. This one wasn't spray-painted. It looked official, standing tall against the night. White text on green metal. My stomach dropped. Welcome to Jackson County. No, that wasn't right. I wasn't anywhere near Jackson County. I hadn't been for miles. I turned my head sharply, my breath catching in my throat. A gas station. The same one I had left an hour ago. Same flickering neon sign. Same cracked pavement. I had been driving in a loop. I swallowed down a wave of nausea, my hands clammy against the wheel. This isn't real. I had been driving straight. There were no turns. No exits. I wasn't supposed to be back here. The seat beside me creaked again. Jack exhaled a low, amused chuckle. Where do you think this road leads? My throat locked up. The air changed. It was sudden, like a pressure had been lifted. The air inside the RV felt normal again. Warm. Breathable. I turned. The passenger seat was empty. The radio remained dark. I let out a shaky breath, my body trembling with exhaustion. I reached for the keys again, gripping them between my fingers. Then, a voice. Not from the speakers. From behind me. Low. Almost a whisper. You never should have stopped. Every hair on my body stood on end. I whipped around. For the first time that night, I saw it. Sitting at the small booth. Not a shadow. Not a trick of the light. A man. Or something that looked like a man. But his features were wrong. Unfinished. Like a painting still waiting to be completed. And his eyes. His eyes were mine. Identical. Same color, same depth. Like staring into a warped, hollow reflection. He smiled. Now, he said, tapping the radio with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Let's play a game. My pulse thundered in my ears. He was there, sitting in the booth, watching me. He looked like me. Not exactly. His face was unfinished, like a smudged reflection in a dirty mirror. The shape was there, but the details weren't right. Except for the eyes. Those were mine. Jack drummed his fingers against the RV's table, the same lazy rhythm that had played beneath his voice on the radio. Tap, tap, tap. Well, he said, tilting his head. Aren't you going to say something? My mouth was dry. My body refused to move. He smiled. Cat got your tongue? I forced my shaking hands to let go of the steering wheel. What are you? Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. I think you already know the answer to that. I swallowed hard. You're not real. His smile widened. Then why are you still here? The air inside the RV was thick. Heavy. I could still feel the warmth from the heater, but somehow the cold was sinking into me anyway. Like something was draining the heat from inside my body. I needed to get out. I needed to run. Jack tapped the table again. Tap, tap, tap. I told you we were going to play a game, didn't I? I forced myself to move, reaching for the door handle. But before my fingers could grasp it, Jack spoke again. If you leave, the game gets harder. I froze. Jack's voice lowered, his tone laced with something that almost sounded like pity. You don't understand what's happening, do you? I turned slowly. He was closer now. He hadn't moved. But somehow he was closer. The table between us seemed shorter. The space inside the RV felt smaller. I tried to steady my breathing. You've been talking to me through the radio. Jack nodded. That's one way to look at it. You know things about me that you shouldn't. Another nod. And I clenched my fists. You're playing with me. Jack's smile faded. His gaze turned sharp. Not just you, he said softly. The words sent a chill through my chest. What do you mean? Jack gestured to the radio, still dark and silent on the dashboard. You think you're the first person to hear my voice? My stomach twisted. You think you're the first one to stop, to listen? A sick feeling curled in my gut. Jack's fingers traced an invisible pattern on the tabletop. Let me tell you something about roads, he murmured. They don't just take you places. They keep things hidden, buried. I didn't move. There are some places, he continued, that exist only because people believe in them. They show up on maps, have road signs pointing their way, but if people stop believing, they'd disappear. Jack's eyes gleamed in the dim light. And some places, he whispered, refuse to disappear, even when they should. A lump formed in my throat. Jack sat back, looking me over like he was assessing something. You've been listening to me this whole time, he said. But tell me, when's the last time you saw another driver? The question punched through my brain like a bullet. I racked my mind, trying to remember. I had passed a few cars earlier, right? But as I thought about it, an awful realization hit me. I couldn't remember any. Not since I turned onto this stretch of road. Not since I heard his voice. Jack grinned. You see the problem now, don't you? A deep, horrible unease slithered through me. I was alone. Completely. The gas station. The road signs. The loop. The realization settled like a weight in my stomach. I hadn't just tuned into Jack's frequency. I had driven into it. A place that shouldn't exist. A road that traps you. I licked my lips, my voice barely a whisper. How do I get out? Jack let out a breathy chuckle. You're already playing the game. The RV groaned around us, the walls pressing in. The space felt even smaller. Jack leaned forward, lowering his voice. Let me give you a rule, he said. Something to help you. I stayed perfectly still. His grin sharpened. Never turn off the radio. A shudder racked through me. Jack tapped the tabletop again. Tap, tap, tap. Then he tilted his head, like he was listening to something, and smiled. Well, he sighed, looks like we're out of time. I blinked. What? Jack leaned back. Someone new's tuning in. The words sent ice through my veins. What does that mean? Jack stretched his arms over his head, smirking. You didn't think this whole station was just for you, did you? A burst of static crackled through the radio. Jack sighed, sounding almost fond. They always think they're the only ones. I grabbed the keys, twisted them in the ignition. The RV rumbled to life. Jack chuckled. Smart move. I yanked the gear shift into drive. The static on the radio shifted. A new voice filtered through. A woman's voice. HLO. Is someone there? A cold pit formed in my stomach. Jack grinned, standing from the booth. Looks like we've got our next player. I slammed my foot on the gas. The RV lurched forward. Jack didn't move. He stood perfectly still as the RV surged ahead, his unfinished face fading into the darkness. Then, the road changed. The flickering gas station lights disappeared. The asphalt stretched out ahead, a long, empty highway. My headlights caught a car in the distance. I nearly cried. A real car. I was out. But then, the radio hissed. Jack's voice came through, warm and smooth. Careful now, he murmured. Wouldn't want to miss the next exit. I ripped the radio out of the dashboard. The static screamed. Then silence. I gripped the wheel, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The road stretched on, endless and empty. I drove, and drove, and drove. But I never saw another town. Never saw another exit. Never saw another car. Only miles of open road. And a single road sign. It was painted black, with my name written across it. Welcome to Jackson County.